Yeah, hi guys. Good morning, everyone. So I'll just share my screen. So before we go, what is the course content? What technology we are going to learn? Let us first see actually what is actually a full stack development. So our main agenda is to be a full stack developer. Since the job market nowadays are looking most of the people who are full stack. So let us see what actually is a full stack development. So a full stack development training program typically covers both front-end and back-end development, focusing on the skills and technologies needed to build a modern, scalable, and efficient web applications. So what exactly a full stack development has? It has a front-end technology, database, HTTP and REST APIs, back-end technologies. Some applications deals with algorithms, web application architecture, and a Git version control. So what are the layers in full stack development you have is client side code, the browser which executes, the server code, what we run, the web server, the backend application server, the database which we use, and the operating system. Operating system is nothing but the environment in which you deploy your application. For us, the role as a developer or a full stack developer, generally interviewer concentrates from the point 1 to point 5. Point 6 is mostly, if you see here, point 6 is mostly for a DevOps engineer, where they will be asking majorly in detail about operating systems and other things. For us, when it comes to point 6, we just need to have an idea of how we can deploy a basic application on the cloud. But majorly, most of the companies or interviewers, they concentrate on point 1 to 5. So what are the front-end technologies we have? So when it comes to front-end technologies, the visualization or the presentation which the users actually see. We have it HTML, CSS, we have JavaScript libraries such as jQuery, React, and you have a framework such as Angular, Vue, Backbone, Ember, and a Bootstrap. So these are all the front-end technologies you have. When it comes to back-end technologies, there are several back-end technologies like Ruby on Rails, Python, which uses a Django framework, PHP Laravel you have, Java you have Java Spring Boot, so Spring you can use. You have a Scala Play framework, and you have Node.js. These are all the backend different flavors or different technologies. There are different flavors you can build, but mostly we'll be concentrating on Node.js. And you have different databases. You have MySQL, you have Postgres, you have MongoDB, you have CouchDB, you have Redis, and Neo.js. What exactly we'll be concentrating mostly on MongoDB and MySQL. The difference we want to showcase is one is a relational database and one is a NoSQL database. So both how it works, that also will be covering. So generally, if your typical development cycle you take it up, the front end development is nothing but the client side. So the front end development involves building a part of the web application that user interacts with. The key technology and concepts include HTML. HTML is nothing but hypertext markup language. The basic structure is like HTML head body you have, some elements tag you have, semantics like header, footer, article section, HTML5 videos. All this sums up to the front end HTML design. This we see in detail when you actually start working or when you actually start the course on the HTML. But actually, we are just seeing like what exactly HTML and the front end have. Then you apply a CSS. CSS is nothing but styling your application. So what you will be having in that basic styling concepts like colors, fonts, margins and paddings, borders, etc. Then you have different layout techniques like flexbox, grids, and positioning of your things. Then responsive design. Now nowadays most of the applications what we build are mostly responsive design. So I like it should be a mobile first approach. So for that we use some media queries. Then we use a CSS frameworks like Bootstrap or Tailwind CSS, animations and transitions. Then you have something called JavaScript library. So JavaScript basically it has variables, data types, loops and conditions. functionals, objects, arrays, DOM manipulation, event handling. You have some of the ES6 features like arrow functions, promise, async and await, error handling with try and catch, working with APIs. So for all these things to work, we use a JavaScript framework called React. So mostly we use React for building or handling all your user interactions or making your website more interactive. We use version control like Git to commit your code. How can you pull the code? How can you add it, push it? How can you collaborate with your team and work? All these things will be controlled by the Git version control. So generally the backend development involves creating the server side logic and database management. So the key technology and concepts include JavaScript. Using Node.js, we will be building a backend server-side code. You can also use Python using Django. You can use Java Spring Boot for backend development. If someone using C Sharp, you can use ASP.NET for web APIs. If you are using Ruby, we can use Ruby on Rails. If you are going with PHP, PHP will be framework done with Laravel. So API is nothing but application programming interfaces. So generally we build the RESTful APIs. The concept of CRUD like create, read, update, delete operations uses HTTP methods like get, post, put and delete. So API versions authentication. So authentication we basically take up with JWT or OAuth. GraphQL is sometimes in some of the client applications or some of the companies where you have to build the reports or reporting engine, we use a GraphQL. Then we do APIs, we can also build using creating and handling endpoints using Express.js. So what are the databases you have? You have a relational database that is SQL based. You use SQL commands like select, insert, update and delete. You design a database like tables, keys and relationship. Then you have a PostgreSQL, MySQL or SQLite. So we will be explaining you mostly on the MySQL database. When you go to NoSQL, we generally go with MongoDB. And NoSQL also we use is ORM. ORM tool like SQLiz generally uses for MongoDB. Instead of writing plain direct insert queries, you can use a SQLiz tool for writing the insert queries. Then you can do the database normalization and optimization. For authentication authorization, generally the two approaches they are follow. One is JWT for stateless authentication and the other is OAuth2 for third-party authentication using Google, Facebook, etc. You can do the session management with cookies and sessions. Passport.js or Node.js used for authentication of the middleware. Server, yeah, we will be learning about Nginx, the web server, on how you can deploy your application using Nginx. Server-side languages, we will be learning Express and Node.js. Additionally, we will be learning about Fastify. So environment management, we use is .env for environment variable configurations. We also extensively learn and how to use asynchronous operations like promise and await. So DevOps job is not us, but we need to have an idea because most of the companies they'll ask, do you have any idea of how you deploy an application? So to answer that question, we need to be always saying yes. So once your application is built, it needs to be deployed and maintained somewhere. So hosting sites, there are different sites where you can host the web application like Netlify, great for static site and front-end application. Vercel, hosting for React apps, serverless functions. Heroku, most of the people are using for backend and full stack apps that support Node.js, Python, and Java, but very widely accepted and people ask is AWS. So AWS, we use EC2 instance and S3 bucket for storing your video audio files for scaling your applications. Then you have DigitalOcean, that is a cloud virtual machine for backend APIs. The Docker is nothing but containerization of the application for easier deployment. Then generally this is a DevOps guy role where they do CI/CD. CI/CD is continuous integration and continuous deployment. That means they set up a CI/CD pipeline to automatically test and deploy the code. They pull the code from the GitHub and they automatically deploy. So that is the options of the DevOps job. So generally, full stack development workflow, what you have is, first, once we have a good grasp of both front end and back end technologies, like we have learned all the technologies individually. Now it's a time for them to combine. So full stack web development involves creating both user interface and the server side backend along with managing the database. So what are the technical stacks you have? A tech stack is a combination of both front-end and back-end technology used in development of full stack application. So common full stack tech stacks you have is mean stack you will be heard mostly. It's a MongoDB, Express, Angular and Node.js. You have a MERN stack. It's MongoDB, Express, React and Node.js. One of the most popular stack and widely required in the job market. Nearly 60 to 70% of the job postings or the job codes they ask is you have a knowledge of MERN stack. Then you have a LAMP stack if you're using Linux, Apache, MySQL and PHP. Then you have Jamstack, it is JavaScript APIs for markups, focus mainly on serverless architecture. But majorly the job market is on mean stack or MERN stack or mostly on Java full stack. These are the technology stack in the current job market, it's trending. So what is a full stack project we do? We develop a front end that is using React for building UI components and handling state. Backend, we do with using Express and Node.js for API routing and server-side logic. Database, we use MongoDB for storing data or MySQL. Authentication, we do using JWT-based authentication for secure login. Hosting, we don't use Heroku, but we do using DigitalOcean to show how we can host an application. So what is the learning path? So first phase one, what we learn is the front end development. So front end development starts with HTML and CSS. So we learn the basics of web structure and styling, understand responsive design using Flexbox and Grid. Then we see the JavaScript fundamentals. Like we learn variables, data types, loops, functions and events. Focus on DOM manipulation and handling events. Then you take it version control. Learn the Git basics, commit history, branching and merging. We learn a JavaScript framework like React for building interactive UIs. What we more learn on it, state, props and the hooks. We use tools like Create React App and React Router for routing. Styling and layout libraries, generally we can build our own CSS or we can use a Bootstrap or Tailwind CSS. Phase 2 is learning the backend development. So backend development we do with Node.js and Express. So learn about Node.js and build RESTful APIs using Express. Then we understand the middleware routing and handling of the request. Then it comes to database. We learn SQL with MySQL or Postgres or NoSQL with MongoDB. Build a CRUD operation and manage data efficiently. Then we do the authentication and authorization. That means implementing authentication with JWT and securing the APIs. Then we deploy the APIs on the DigitalOcean or the cloud network. So phase 3 is building a full stack application. Like we have developed the front end, then we have developed the back end, but somewhere we need to connect both, right? That means we use Axios or something, a data fetching tool to connect both your front end and back end. So we learn how to fetch the data from back end using fetch or Axios. We implement feature like login, registration and user profile. Then we do the authentication, that user authentication and authorization. Deploy both front end and back end on a cloud. On a cloud means on a DigitalOcean box. Phase 4 is a CI/CD or the deployment, the DevOps job, where they do using Dockers. Dockers is nothing but they containerize your application for consistent deployment. Then they do a CI/CD pipeline. They set up automatically testing and deployment using GitHub. Then they do the cloud platform. Nothing but they host your application on cloud platform like AWS or DigitalOcean. So what type of application we can build? We will be trying to build a web application like what you see here. or like this one of the other applications, web applications. By the end of our training, we will be building this type of applications, or we can also build a React Native mobile apps as well. So if you see here, see, we have seen so many technologies, right? What will be the our learning phase? One second. So what is the course we will be covering here? We will be covering HTML. We will be having CSS. We'll talk about JavaScript. We talk React. Then we talk Node.js. So before Node.js, we will go with MySQL. Then we talk MongoDB. We'll discuss, means we'll learn MongoDB. Then we go with Node.js. So we have all these technologies we have learned. What we'll be doing? We need to understand what is microservice architecture. So when we understand here what is microservice architecture, then we will be able to we will be building a real-time application with using microservice architecture. So this is the main agenda. So even if we are full stack developers, ultimately we need to build a real-time application using microservice architecture. So once we are able to build, then we need to deploy it on cloud, which we will be using DigitalOcean. Both AWS and DigitalOcean mostly works on the same. We'll be mostly showcasing on the DigitalOcean. So we know we do all this thing activity, but we also need to learn efforts estimation. Example, I got a HTML from my designer. So in the real world, when you're working in some applications, right? For example, I'm showing you this form. You can see this form. So my designer has given me this form. So how do you estimate? There are certain set of features like my profile, change password, logout. Then you have academics, technical courses. There are different functionalities. So as a developer, how do you do an efforts estimation? That also we should see. Then we will see how you prepare a design document. So design document is nothing but from us as a developer, mostly they will be expecting us to share a design document for whatever we are designing. Design document is nothing but writing a functionality of what you are going to implement, what is a database model, what are the structures you have, a use case diagram, like how the data flows, so that the end point is they will be submitting to the client, because few of the process oriented companies expects us to give the design document as well. Then we'll just see as a unit test document. Few of once we are done with the development, we need to share them the unit test document as well. That also we will see how we can do. Then we'll learn about Git, on how you can push the code, pull the code, commit the code, how you can work in a collaboration. Then we see one collaboration tool like Jira or Trello. Like if you're working with multiple people, how can you work on a real time with multiple people? Along with this, we focus on real time problems. Like on a real time scenario, if you get a sudden problem, how can you handle? We'll be checking that few of the use cases as well on that. So these are the things all we cover in this. Apart from this, if you have a basic knowledge, we'll just touch base on Spring Boot. So Spring Boot microservices. Why Spring Boot microservices is because we are building a real-time application. So on a real-time application can interact with both Node.js microservice and Spring Boot microservice. So how we can interact to do a real-time application using microservice, that also we'll be doing using Spring Boot and Node.js. So this we will be covering Spring Boot as well. For this you need to have some basic Java knowledge as well. So how we are going to teach, what are the training steps we have, we'll see. So mostly our agenda will be, while learning, we focus on the real-time project training. So real-time project training typically refers to hands-on practical training when we work on live projects or the real-world scenarios to gain experience and improve our skills. So in such trainings, what will happen is we generally get exposure to the tools, techniques, and challenges that a professional faces while working on actual project, as opposed to the theoretical learning. So let's see what is a breakdown of real-time project training might be. So industrial relevant projects. The training usually we focus on the current industrial practice and type of project professionals works on. So participants are nothing but the students who are undergoing the training. They work on ongoing or simulate a projects that are relevant to their field of interest. So example like software development, digital marketing, e-commerce, edtech, all such things. So when we do a practical project on live, they can also simulate the same project by building their own projects. They get hands-on experience. So learners are actually involved in the entire life cycle of a project, from planning and requirement gathering to execution and delivery. The training might also involve working with actual tools and software or a platform that professional uses. So we have experienced mentors and guide learners through the entire process, offering advice, troubleshooting issues, and ensure that the learner understands the real world application of the work. So for example, when I am teaching you something, we do some practicals. So when you're doing some practical live use case scenarios, when you get some issues or you're not able to debug, so that time how we can collaborate and do the troubleshooting, that we'll be checking. So that is what is about. Next one, collaborative work. We often work in a team, simulating from some real world environment. This will help the developer to collaborate and communicate uh, and do the problem solving. That means there are two people working in the team. So we give a small task and we ask you both to work as a team. So in such cases, the team building and how you collaborate and work with each other will improve. So we, instead of focusing on theoretical concepts, we generally deal with real problems like debugging issues, managing project timelines, and interacting with the client. So tools and technologies what we use. So when we are doing a real-time project training, we get exposed to different tools and technologies that are actually used in industries. For example, a software development like Git, Jira, and frameworks like React, Angular we use. So what are the tools and technologies what we are going to learn? We cover what we have. We'll be using Visual Studio Code. We'll be using Node.js. Visual Studio Code for development. We'll use Node.js. Then we use Postman. Postman is nothing but it looks like this to test our APIs. Something like this to test whatever we have written, right? That APIs we need to test. So for that we use the Postman. Then we use Git. Git is nothing but to push and commit your code. The Git, if you see here, right? Something like this, right? Your application will be here, will be hosted somewhere in your GitHub. So here like this, how you can push and clone the code, all these things. So we'll be using Git. on how do you push and pull the code or commit your code in your branch and raise the merge request. What else we'll be having? What else we'll be checking? Visual Studio Code, we have Node.js, Postman, Git. When we deal with Spring Boot, right? When we touch base Spring Boot, we will use Spring Tool Suite, or it is like Spring Stylus Studio, or we can say is Spring Studio. Then we use MySQL Workbench. This is used for connecting to your MySQL. What else we use? We use Cloud Mongo. Since we can, since instead of installing locally, we can also use MongoDB. So what project we'll be building? We'll be trying to build an edtech project. We'll be building edtech project. Similar concept can be used to build a food app as well. Food app as well. So the concepts we learn and we build a real-time project, the same concept can be used to build your own food app as well. So these are all the things which we'll be covering in during our training sessions.